everybody, online and in person. As is our custom at ACU, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri, the traditional owners and custodians of country. We respectfully acknowledge our elders past and present, and remember that they have passed on wisdom to us in various ways. As is ACU tradition, we'll also start with a prayer. I've looked through the ACU prayer book, and I found here a prayer for world harmony, which I think is a fitting prayer, so I'll lead us in that prayer. Almighty God, you are the Father of all people on earth. I beseech you to guide all the nations and their leaders in the ways of justice and peace. Protect us from the evils of injustice, prejudice, exploitation, conflict, and war. Help us to put away mistrust, bitterness, and hatred. Teach us to cease the storing and using of implements of war. Lead us to find peace, respect, and freedom. Unite us in the making and sharing of tools of peace against ignorance, poverty, disease, and oppression. Grant that we may grow in harmony and friendship as brothers and sisters created in your image, to your honor and praise. Amen. And that was from St. Ephraim the Syrian. If someone is on the Teams on this end, can you please press the record button? So it's recording. They're one step ahead of me. Great work, guys. Well, this is a very privileged moment for us as a community to have these wonderful guest speakers, external guests and an internal guest as well. And I'll introduce them one by one. We'll start with Rabbi Ralph. Is it Genende? All right. I was saying Genende and someone corrected me, so I'm just making sure the correction was right. So born in modern-day Zimbabwe, Rabbi Genende was raised in South Africa and served as reserve chaplain in the South African Defense Force. For over 3 decades, he has served in many communities and in many interfaith initiatives. In 2018, he was awarded an Order of Australia, and in 2021 received the Sir John Monash Award for Outstanding Community Service. He currently serves at Jewish Care Victoria and is the convener of Kehilat Kesher, an inclusive Orthodox initiative reaching out to people who feel alienated or on the outskirts of the faith community. He is married with 3 children and several grandchildren. So we'll make them all welcome in a second, but that's Rabbi Ralph. Nigel, Dr. Nigel Zimmermann was raised Baptist, became an Anglican minister, and eventually converted to Catholicism. He completed his PhD at the University of Edinburgh and has produced many books, including Levinas and Theology, published in 2013, and Facing the Other, John Paul II, Levinas and the Body, published in 2015, just as 2 of the works that I'll mention. He served as principal advisor to the Archbishop of Melbourne and is currently Director of Catholic Mission and Identity at Melbourne Archdiocese Catholic Schools across the road. So it was a nice, easy walk for you to get here, Nigel, but we still greatly appreciate it. We know how heavy Victoria Parade traffic can be, so thanks for making it. He's married with 5 kids, am I right? 5? Okay, good. Thank you. We'll make Nigel welcome with the others at the end. Can I introduce Sheikh Mohammad Nawaz Saleem, a leader and scholar known for his work, especially to build bridges between the Muslim community and others. He has served on the Australian Defence Force's Religious Advisory Committee, and he is currently also the chaplain for Victoria Police, and he is on the board of Imams Victoria. There's many more things, but Mohammed will introduce himself to you as well. And lastly, but not least, can I introduce to you Ali Shahsavand, a digital learning designer in the Center for Education and Innovation here at ACU. He was born in Iran and is what you would call a spiritual seeker. He's married with 1 child. And the reason we've invited Ali up here is to represent us as the common voice, as those who are searching and seeking an answer to some of these questions about dialogue and different religious traditions. So Ali is going to help keep it real. And after all the comments, if Ali wants to, I guess, voice something on behalf of us or add his comments as a spiritual seeker, he will do that. So please make them all welcome. So I'm going to start with an opening statement, and I would like each of the panel members, maybe you can introduce yourselves further if you think my introduction wasn't adequate, but then offer a beginning answer to this question. In a world of increasing conflict, there have been calls for greater dialogue. Some may wonder if dialogue in the 21st century is even possible. If we are to hold fast to the idea that the way to resolving problems or finding ways forward together is dialogue, what do you think is necessary for real dialogue to occur? And I might start with Rabbi Ralph.
Thank you, and thanks for the introduction. My main work is actually in interfaith work now, and I work for an organization called AIJSE or AJAC, which means that I believe in dialogue. You know, if you're out to buy a house or find a place to live, what do they say to you? Location, location, location. But if you want dialogue, what do we say to you? Listen, listen, listen. I think listening is the key to any kind of real relationship, and is certainly the key to any form of dialogue. Is dialogue possible in the kind of world that we are living today? Well, I'd say it's become extremely difficult, and sometimes even remote, the possibility between certain groups or people who are in conflict actually having the kind of dialogue. But if we stop listening, if we stop speaking to each other, if we stop believing in dialogue, and we surrender ourselves to the nihilists and to the extremists, then I think we lose our shared humanity. For I think the key to our humanity and the key to growing and resolving issues as human beings rests in dialogue. So I still believe in it. What's necessary for it is to acknowledge the other, to listen to the pain of the other. At the moment, I'd say one of the hardest forms of dialogue within Australia, maybe across the world, is between Jews and Muslims. We're having great difficulty in carrying on the kind of conversations that we should be having, that we should be acknowledging each other's pain, acknowledging each other's humanity, and not giving up. Because I think what should bind us all as people of religion, as people of faith, and people of spirituality, surely it is something called hope and determination. That is fundamental to, I think, biblical tradition, fundamental to my tradition, and for me, it's fundamental for dialogue, which I believe is not only necessary, but critical and essential and possible.
And I want to endorse everything that Father, that
right.
gives away my own tradition very quickly, doesn't it? That Rabbi Ralph. How is that? Is that better? Okay, wonderful. Excellent. My own children would have given me a thumbs down if I said, can you now hear me? Look, I want to endorse what Rabbi Ralph was just saying about dialogue. In my own experience, I think it's helpful to have a good understanding of what we mean by dialogue. And in my own observations, I would say that I've seen two kinds of dialogue take place. Since the early days of my own schooling, I've seen an increased focus on dialogue in a fairly superficial way. I've seen examples of it which sound rather like an empty swirl of words between people in a room where everyone is really being encouraged to stay within their particular position or viewpoint or whatever it might be. And dialogue is emphasized as a value in and of itself. And I think that can be problematic. And in a world of great fracture now, especially online, where people tend to retreat into their own particular ideological island, and really see everyone else as in somehow opposition, that form of dialogue is not very compelling. But there is a richer tradition of dialogue, which I've certainly seen from my own tradition emphasized by people like Pope Francis in recent years, which calls for dialogue not as an endless swirl of words between people in their own camps, but as a meeting of what we might say is the face-to-face, the meeting of us in our own substantiated personhood, whatever our tradition is, wherever it is that we've come from, that in a way, that strengthens us to do the heavy lifting of dialogue. So to pick up Rabbi Ralph's notion there of dialogue as something that is important, is constructive, but ultimately the end of dialogue is not dialogue in itself. It's something more like love or friendship. And we don't mean that in an empty sense, in a very concrete way. If dialogue is being offered in a substantial way, from the strength and the humility of one's own self-understanding, then hopefully it can build something like community in some kind of way. And that is a dialogue, I think, that we do see episodes and examples of around the world, even in the most heated controversies or conflicts. There are those often quietly in the background exercising dialogue in that kind of way. So to step away from the superficiality of what we might think is dialogue to a more substantial and enriching dialogue. And I think there's lots of reasons to hope for the strength of that and the possibility of that, despite what we might be seeing day to day in the world.
Thank you very much. And I also begin with the acknowledgement to the country. I pay respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. I also share the same ideas about dialogue. Dialogue starts when listening begins. The former president of Iran, Mohammad Khatami, told this when he started this civilizational dialogue movement. And also dialogue for peace can happen when we respect each other. The respect has to be in the equal footing. We cannot have a kind of dialogue that we wanted to achieve in an unequal footing. So we have to respect the other person, the other community, and take them as they are and provide that platform for us to engage respectfully. And I wish that any dialogue with conditions attached may not be successful. We have to come into dialogue without conditions attached, so that the other person will be, or the other parties or the other communities will feel free, that they are valued, and their point of view is taken and respected and valued. And I hope also that we need to have this hope for peace. The hope for peace is not only, possible, but also achievable. So if we have that, these four elements, in my view, dialogue is possible and peace is achievable, I think.
Thank you for those answers so far. That's been wonderful. So what we can gather is that, well, dialogue is crucial, it's critical, and listening is a very important aspect of that, is probably the most important aspect of that, let's say. And there should be no conditions on that dialogue. And I guess if we're leading to a place of not just superficiality, but authentic love, well, love is supposed to be unconditional, I guess. And that dialogue, again, it's aiming, it should be approached with something that's hoping for peace. Ali, would you like to just introduce yourself, perhaps a little bit of context, not too much, but a little bit of context about why I might have asked you to be here? And did you want to maybe say something from these first answers that came to your attention that you liked, something, or if there's something that you want more discussion about or that needs to be probed further? Over to you.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. A little bit of context. How much time do we have? I'm going to keep it very short. So Jeremy and I, we came to know each other basically because, as he introduced me, I was seeking things. I was born into a Muslim family. Then I started asking really difficult questions. Some of those were quite frowned upon. So that's why I asked harder questions. And the last question that I asked was for myself. What if you weren't born into a Muslim family? What if you weren't born in Iran? So only because you were born in this family, in this religion, does it make it right? So that would be a very short introduction as to why Jeremy thought I would be a good fit here. I'm still not sure about this, Jeremy. Probably not a very wise choice. But I really respect the fact that I've been given the opportunity to be here, because I do have a lot of friends that I feel like their voice is missing in such conversations or such settings, and I'm very thankful. Going back to the conversation, because it was very interesting about dialogue. It's a word when we look at it. Yes, dialogue is good. It's good to have a dialogue. But if I may add something to the conversation, that is, we need to also consider that having a dialogue is hard. Having to listen to someone and actively listen to someone is hard. Sometimes I'm in a classroom, I've signed up for it, I've paid for it with my money, with my time, but I find that I drowse, I'm just not listening. So then I go back and I'm like, why am I not listening? I've signed up for it willingly. No one forced me to be here. So being able to actively listen in a conversation, not because you want to come up with an answer which is better than what you've just heard, for actually being part of that moment, if that makes sense. So that's why I think dialogue is hard. It's not as easy as we just say, let's have a dialogue. And that's why we are sometimes failing at it. And I'm talking about myself, really. Sometimes if I'm in a conversation and someone is talking about a topic, let's say, I just told you I'm from Iran. Right now, that nation is divided, big time. You will see Iranian diasporas over here in rallies, and I don't want to talk about politics, just very quickly, holding Israeli flags, the US flags, and the former Iranian flags. The same nation in Iran, well, some of them are holding slightly different flags. You got the Palestinian flags, you got the other flag. And I'm like, so the same nation, they speak the same language, but what's missing? Where is the dialogue? Why is it not happening? Sometimes because I come from an ESL background as well. Sometimes language, well, a lot of time, language is the problem because people just cannot communicate, cannot converse in a different language. But here, that's not the case. So what's holding us back from having a dialogue? Right now, I've got family in Iran that are refusing to speak with me because I'm part of a different dialogue. So dialogue is easier said than actually done if the other side doesn't want to listen, or if you don't want to listen. So going back to, again, I'm reflecting on everything everyone has said. I agree 100%. We need to come in with open eyes without preconditions. So we actually listen to other people and have a meaningful dialogue. And I think that's what's missing in most of the parts of the world these days. I'm just going to cut it off there. Yeah.
Thank you. Would the panel like to respond or build on any of that?
I'm happy to say something very briefly. I'm really pleased, Ali, to hear you pick up on the difficulty of dialogue. I work in the Catholic school system in Melbourne, where we have across 300 schools, about 120,000 children enrolled. And in every single school, there are a number of religious traditions that are represented amongst the student body in those schools. And when our teachers are guiding our students to enter into a more dialogical approach, when it's more substantial and they have opportunities to listen to one another, they start to encounter the really difficult moments of dialogue, and students see it very quickly. And we live in a culture where we're a little bit uncomfortable when we hit the difficult stuff in conversation. So the impolite moments or the topics that seem a little bit difficult or problematic or challenging. And what we try to do when we're doing our best work on our best days is help the students to be patient in that listening. Because if you are sitting with those of other religious traditions, if it's a real dialogue, you will hear something that makes you uncomfortable. Stepping into the discomfort helps our students become more resilient listeners themselves. It helps them appreciate that their own tradition has its problems in its history as well as its goodness and graces, and helps them to recognize the same in others. We take a long view in education. We know that we're not going to solve the world's problems today or tomorrow, but we hope we're helping those students to grow, to become the kinds of people that will exercise dialogue even when it's hard, even when it will require more patience and further listening. Because as soon as we stop doing that, it's no longer dialogue.
So I'll just add to that and say that I think that dialogue can be dangerous as well. Because I think sometimes people want to have the dialogue, but they're afraid of the consequences, maybe afraid partly, or Nigel has said partly, of things that they may have to face within themselves. But I think it can be dangerous for different groups sometimes, because other members of their faith or group, for example, are going to condemn them for having the dialogue. So it takes a lot of courage to have dialogue as well. And I think the other part is dialogue is very delicate. I do think there are kind of rules and that need to be observed in dialogue. You know, you have to have that respect for each other. You have to be prepared to sit with the discomfort, and you have to be prepared to sit silently, which is often the hardest thing for people in a dialogue. They'll just, something sets them off and they stop listening because they just want to say what they've got to say. And that isn't what, you know, dialogue should be about. But at the same time, and I think dialogue may be dangerous, sometimes even devastating, but it could be incredibly delightful and empowering as well.
I agree with Rabbi Ralph. This is our main issue at the moment. Dialogue is, you know, or successful dialogue can happen based on the contextual, that we have been in a peaceful world until things happen, possibly in starting with, you know, the nearest past is the, what do you call it, the bombing in September 11, and then following incidents happen. So all these incidences have, to different degrees, have affected the dialogue. And to have a effective dialogue, you have to have trust. And after September 11, the Muslim community has been seen as perpetrators, and hence lost the trust of the vast majority of the people. And every Muslim is seen as a terrorist in many countries, and the legislations were made addressing the Muslims, whether he is a peaceful Muslim or the otherwise. So there should be some kind of the development of a trust has to happen, and otherwise it will be very difficult when we engage in a dialogue with other faith communities. So there should be mutual respect, and as I have said in the beginning, but then also the trust that we can engage a meaningful dialogue and come to a good, a meaningful coexistence, if you want to say it that way. Yeah. And definitely there is a fear of being disowned by the same community or for which that you are representing, and trying to do the best of the thing that we could do. After all, dialogue is encouraged in Quran, in the Bible, and in Torah. I'm sure the Quran very specifically says that you have to engage with the other communities. Idfa billati hi ahsan, you respond in the best way. Wajadilhum billati hi ahsan. Talk to them and have dialogue with them in a best possible manner in terms of language and approach and so on. So these are there, the teachings are there, but the context will dictate how a dialogue might take place.
Well, thank you. Thank you to our panel for speaking about that, adding those comments. And Rabbi, you suggested some rules of engagement, which, yeah, sounded really good when we know that it's dangerous. Dialogue is dangerous. And yet, if we engage with it, if we enter the discomfort, can there be goodness and beauty and truth ending in love? I want to ask a question about our digital sphere, social media in particular. Is this a space where dialogue can occur? What are your thoughts? Any volunteers?
Maybe digital space is like a plane without a pilot. And if you say Facebook or Instagram or all the other means, so dialogue can happen, of course, lots of dialogues happening. And without a proper moderation, it can lead to much more harm than benefit. So it is easy for digital platforms to demonize. And that's what the big powers are doing, demonize the other communities if they want to target and then develop into a, what you call it, a much more drastic actions against those communities. And it can determine the outcome of certain outcome that is favorable to someone or it is against someone as well. So we have seen sometimes the elections are determined through the digital platforms. So as I have said, I just wanted to, it is good. It has given us a platform for those people who don't have voice. Or in other words, the digital platforms are the voices for the voiceless, and yet it is like a flight without a pilot.
I've been involved in some incredible digital dialogue, and I think that it's incredible. The world has opened up to us today. So I've been part of groups that we are speaking to Muslims in Indonesia. We are speaking to Christian scholars in the USA, and we do this as part of a group. And so I think that it's opened up for us the possibility of conversations with people right across the world from different faiths and from different backgrounds. I think the same rules, though, do need to apply for any kind of dialogue in the digital sphere as in the kind of dialogue we're having now. You still have to have the same kind of rules and restrictions, and the dangers there, of course, of people jumping on where you don't know where they're coming from and who they are, etc., and not being controlled. And that can be like your pilotless, and so it is the same dangers Or there may be increased dangers, particularly if AI decides that they, will master, will actually control the dialogue, and you never know what bot is there.
I would just want to add, I think, an emphasis that I'm certainly seeing from Pope Leo on the topic of AI, which is we have to protect the sacredness of the human being in the midst of AI. So he said recently that faces and persons are sacred. And this is in a context where people's images and faces are manipulated, can be controlled, can send all sorts of messaging and communicate all sorts of things that might be very much at odds with the person whose face is being replicated in some way. I think we're in a really dangerous moment with AI. And I agree, my term for the digital and online space is that it's like the Wild West. There's a lot of people and a lot of harm that can be done with not a lot of rules, it seems. So it's dangerous. But if whatever we're doing in that space is protecting what is genuinely human, then I do believe some good can be done. And that could be in the way we're communicating. It could be in the decisions we make over what platforms we use. And there's no doubt that AI is a new opportunity for either exploitation and harm, or goodness and fairness. If we keep the human being at the heart of our intentions and what we're trying to honor, then some good can come.
Sure, I think everyone has kind of said what needs to be said here. I just want to add a little bit more to it. I completely agree with everything that's been said. So the online space is quite an interesting place, to say the least. And the reason I'm choosing that word is carefully is because just like anything else, it all comes down to the user. How are we using it? What are we using it for? Do we actually want a dialogue, or is it a place where we're not responsible or we're not held responsible for our actions or for what we say? So going back to the online digital space, we have a number of things to address. Number one, which platform? Is it just a one way? Because if it's just one way, if you're just putting a comment out there, then that's not a dialogue. But if you're joining a room with 2,000 people there and 10 moderators, where there is actual dialogue happening between faiths or about a topic, then I would slightly separate that a little bit, because as it was touched based on, it's all about the human in the center. If we have that in mind, where we're engaging in the dialogue, what is the purpose of it? Are we here in this digital space because we don't know how to have a dialogue, or we're not informed enough, or we're not qualified enough to have a dialogue about a certain thing? So let's say I'm not a surgeon. I have no right to go into a room or a forum and talk to a surgeon about a particular surgery. Why did you do this? I've got no idea. I'm not equipped to be part of that conversation. If I'm really keen to learn, I can sit down and maybe I'll learn a thing or two. Probably won't, but so again, I think it's a bit hard to say online space is all evil or it's all good. It all comes down to us as human beings. What do we use it for? And what is our intent? Because there will be people out there that want to exploit it. There are algorithms, there is AI that was touched based upon. There will be people that want to use that space to monetize, to get elected. So obviously they have their own agenda, their own algorithms, bots, and whatnot going around. So it all again, very uncharted territory. And I think it was well said that once we keep the human in the center, when we want to say anything or do anything, I think that's probably the key that will probably save us. And just to end, I'm going to mention a conference I went to yesterday at RMIT. One of the main themes that came through was pretty much the same thing. So AI is around us. It's happening. We're talking about a human-centered solution or human-centered AI solution. But what about human-decentered AI solutions? Because if we're not careful, if we not guard this space, that's what's going to happen, whether we like it or not. These algorithms will slightly put us aside. Without our intentions, maybe we have the best intentions at heart, but we have a lot of work today to make sure that we are driving it. And I'll probably end on that one.
And thank you. And a reminder that Ali is a digital learning designer. So this is his field as well. But I think what we can take away from all of that is that, well, AI and the digital world can be used for good. It can be used for evil, let's say, and everything in between. And what seems to be important is safeguarding humanity and putting the human person at the center of all these things that we're using, making sure the pilot is a human person, and making sure that our faces and who we are being preserved and protected and actually thriving here. What do you think? And I think Nigel talked about love, and I think that's touched on this a little bit already. But what must happen after dialogue for it to bear fruit?
Perhaps I'll start that one off. I think that dialogue in itself has got its limitations, and dialogue needs to lead to action, and it needs to lead to some people talk about not only the dialogue, but talk about side to side, not only speaking, but also actually doing actions together. So if the dialogue actually leads to having a human relationship, a deeper human relationship, I think that is so essential in order to bear fruit. I also want to pick up on something that Nigel said before. There's a lot of superficiality in dialogue, and one-off dialogues, one-off things can be very nice, and we all get together and we have a great photo opportunity. There's a phrase that a colleague of mine uses in Israel who is deeply involved in interfaith work, and he says there's interfaith and there's interfake. There's a lot of interfake stuff where people, very superficially, we're all getting along together, we all sing Kumbaya, we all love that good photo opportunity. Make sure we get one today, please. So there's a lot of that, and so I think needs to lead to real action, lead to real ongoing relationships is so important. Building relationships, and especially speaking here, I think it's really important as well is that younger people get involved. A lot of us have been involved in this for a long time. We're the ancients. We need you guys. We need younger faces and younger people getting involved in the interfaith engagement as well. So if there's anybody here who's interested in it, please, do get involved, because I think that building those relationships for the future of our country. We have a Royal Commission going on at the moment in terms of the deep disengagement within our country, and we need for your future, and I think a future for my grandchildren as well. We want dialogue to move into real deep relationships where people recognize, speak, and work together.
I would just like to add to that the very human realities of friendship. So we talk about action coming out of dialogue. In one sense, a really enriching dialogue grows over time. There's no moment where there's a full stop, the dialogue's finished, and everyone gets up and decides what to do now. Action should emerge almost organically from healthy dialogue. But you have to be intentional. There's no accidental work in building peace. It has to have an intentionality of building friendship with people with whom there might be disagreement. There might even be very serious, long-standing conflict. I know with my own children, I try to make a point of visiting other places of worship with them and helping them to see that others from other traditions are human. We take it for granted, but until you see that, you don't realize it. And one example, very briefly, is I took my 14-year-old to a synagogue a little while ago, and as part of the way that their evening was progressing, the youth group came out and were sharing in some hospitality for visitors. And my 14-year-old just looked at me and said, "They've got a youth group." And he suddenly realized, similar to his own Catholic parish, Here was a context where there were young people just like him gathering as part of their faith community. And it was really beautiful because it normalizes. It just normalizes that these are people and good people with whom you can actually have a friendship. That's something that can be built. I don't know what the future holds for him, but I hope that when he sees some of the evidence of conflict as he grows older that are there in the world, he'll be able to draw upon examples like that to feel that there's an opportunity for dialogue, peace building, friendship, and so on. So I guess what I would be emphasizing there is just normalizing friendship and the face-to-face that emerges out of dialogue. But it doesn't happen accidentally. It only happens when we're being as intentional as we possibly can.
I think the outcome of the dialogue has to be to lead to a coexistence, cohesive. Not dialogue for the sake of dialogue. Dialogue to understand the other person. Dialogue no need to happen at the university level or at the higher level. It can happen with your neighbor, a dialogue with your neighbor. Maybe say hi to the other people and get to know them and get to understand the other person or the person next to you. So that will lead to some sort of an understanding and not to prolong with this prejudice. If some people are different in their color or different in their language or different in their stature or something, and or we come from a different country and these people are going to be like this. We are all Australians. So we have to understand the other person, the Australianness, and try to coexist. And understanding other person must lead to a peaceful coexistence. So it at a very lowest level. And if we can coexist as a neighbor, as a person next to you, love thy neighbor is the religious concept with all the religions. And so if we can achieve that, and that is the first step. Dialogue happened. That is why the United Nations still exist. Without the dialogue after, world wars, the United Nations would not have. So the idea of resolving conflicts through negotiation and dialogue was the bedrock of these organizations. So hopefully we can achieve that level of outcomes or that kind of what you call it results if we were to begin. So any, what you say, that charity begins at home, and I think that is the same thing for us as well in terms of dialogue and peace. Begins at the lowest level in the neighborhood and then the person next to you.
Yeah, just wanted to echo most of the things that was already said, and just to finish off by saying that I find that after a dialogue, it would be a really good opportunity to reflect on how things went. Did I achieve what I came here for? And that is not to win the argument. Did I become a better person? Because that's the journey I'm on. So if I'm engaging in a dialogue, I'm there to become a better version of myself. And the reason that I love dialogues in general is because I get to meet and talk to people who've been on a completely different journey to myself. There is about, well, last time I checked, it was 9 billion. I'm not sure how many, but there is 9 billion of us on the planet. And we've each had a complete different journey, even if we lived in the same neighborhood, in the same country, spoke the same language. So that fascinates me, and that what drives me into a conversation. So I will summarize by saying, going back to your question, Jeremy, after a dialogue is the moment of reflection. Who was I as a person when I went to this dialogue, and how am I any different? Have I become a better version of myself as to before or not? What are some of the gaps that I have? What can I do about it? Do I need to jump online? Do I need to talk to ChatGPT? Or are there other venues? Can I go back to the person and ask them to clarify or invite them to a further dialogue? That would probably how I would go about after the dialogue.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think we'll have some closing statements maybe. And it's an opportunity to maybe summarize your thoughts if there's something that you want to say extra. But I want to ask, is dialogue possible today, right now, in the world we're living in? Is it possible? What do you think needs to happen for it to be possible? What can you contribute to that space? What can we? Whatever you want to answer, any part of that, if you want to include that as part of your closing statements.
Everyone's being very polite about who's going to speak next. I would just say in a very simple way, I think after some of the horrors that we've seen in recent times, including in Australia, so what we're seeing from one country to the next and across the globe, we're seeing a whole range of examples of very serious conflict, and some of the most direct impacts weren't felt in Australia until our fuel prices started dropping. We might have seen and felt some of those stories, but until it started hitting large numbers of people in Australia, we didn't feel it as a nation, except, of course, for what happened at Bondi. And I feel that just needs to be named as a very serious example of something which tells the story about why dialogue is necessary. So for me, the question about whether it's possible or not, that gets answered when people get up, roll up their sleeves and get involved to do the right thing for others. That's answered somewhat when people step in to do the right thing, and dialogue is part of doing the right thing. It's not a high sort of strange philosophical category that we have to debate and consider before we enter into. It's something quite practical and intentional that we can be part of. So I think there's a need for it, but it does require people, and it will require younger people to really take that up and be intentional about it. It can't just be those already in leadership roles. Many of the world's problems are taking place because of those who are in some leadership roles. So we need young people to see that there's a need for it and feel inspired enough to step forward, take something of a risk, and enter into dialogue with the other in their own context.
So I believe that it is possible. We, as a Jewish community, we've seen people who are refusing to speak to us, people who are demonizing us, people who are making us the other, and refusing to engage with us because they've judged us, they've othered us, etc. But at the same time, during this difficult time, there have been people who have reached out, people who we've reached out to, and we are engaging, and it is happening. So I know many people have got quite disillusioned by it, certainly within the Jewish community, and saying, well, you know, nobody loves us anymore. But at the same time, I'd say I do believe that the love is out there. You know, it has been said, you know, that love, as you pointed out to us, Mohammad, is something that unites us. You spoke about love your neighbor. The problem is a lot of people said, love thy neighbor, but choose thy neighborhood. Yeah, you can choose the neighborhood. Yeah, I'll just live in this neighborhood, and then I don't have to really reach out beyond my own neighborhood. We got to reach out beyond ourselves. You know, hatred undermines all borders and breaks things down, and it breaks things up. But love can break down suspicion and break down hostility and break down disengagement. So I think if there's something that unites us, and I think unites this panel as well, is that idea that we can reach out, that dialogue is possible, and that we should and not give up, because we are people of faith and hope and belief in it. Even if it is the minority of people who believe in it, let us lead the way in saying, and that you lead the way in the next generation as well, saying it is possible, it is essential, it is critical for the future of Australia, it is critical for the future of our very dangerous and difficult conflicted world.
Of course, dialogue is possible. After every conflict, the conflict come to an end because of the dialogue. If you have heard the Ukrainian president yesterday, he was telling that now that we have had the war, we have to engage in dialogue to bring this to an end. So everybody has to encourage Putin to engage. I think there were 20 odd leaders joining Armenia. And so that shows whether it is by force or by choice, the dialogue is the destination. So we can't avoid the dialogue. And in our context, what we should do, we should engage. We should develop trust. We should have hope in order for us to engage with a multi-faith community to engage in dialogue. And that's what we are doing, Rabbi, in our multi-faith gatherings and multi-faith engagements. We are trying to promote that dialogue and ultimately hoping for a good and kind of a measurable understanding, if I would like to say, that we are able to sit together and talk. So I'm sure we all have to have a hope, and at the same time, we have to strive hard to engage and ultimately promote cohesion in this beautiful country of ours.
And Ali, our ACU spiritual seeker, what's your verdict? What has this conversation brought for you?
Look, I think we don't have a choice. Seriously, we have to engage in a dialogue to protect our home, and I'm talking about Australia. There is a reason I've chosen to live here, and that's because I can see hope for us here. I can see that we're a nation that we still have a chance. I feel like in many parts of the world that has kind of faded away a little bit, or I just don't. I'm sorry, I don't want to be bleak, but I just don't see it. But in Australia, I think we still have a chance. And just to summarize, when I started as an ESL teacher here in Australia, I had students from all over the world coming here, from South America, from, I don't know, Mexico. Oh, by the way, Mexico, I've learned that it's not South America, and I apologize if anyone is from Mexico. They came here with a lot of hope, and that was to try to have that dialogue and that conversation that they weren't allowed to have back at home. So I think even though in the current climate of things, it seems a bit further away, but again, nothing is impossible. It's definitely possible. But can we, again, we are driving it. Can we make that possible? So by itself, who knows? Maybe it is possible, maybe it's not. But can we make it possible here? Can we have meaningful dialogues here? And we might need to define the word dialogue, because we have meaningful dialogues, we have just a dialogue for the sake of dialogue. So yes, to summarize, it is possible, only if we want it to be. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the wonderful speakers today. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing what you've shared. I guess it's a place of danger and vulnerability, and yet of hope and ultimately of love. So thank you so much for being here. Again, thank you everyone for coming along to this event. It's important to be here because we're not only dialoguing, but we're listening, and hopefully we're learning, and we're moving forward each step of the way to be the people we're called to be and to make the world that we're called to make. So again, thank you to our guest speakers. I have gifts for you all I've actually left them at the back and I want to run up the stairs and run back down. So I'll give it to you after everyone's dispersed. But I want to thank you all again for being here, giving up your time. We're very grateful. And thank you to all our staff and student community who have made the efforts to be here for this hour. God bless you all.